All right, and we're live. Here we are on our next episode.
Hey, fam.
Hey,
Yo,
fam.
yo, we in the building.
In the building, it's been a minute. All right, so this one is called The Unfiltered Truth About Exiting from Your E-Commerce Business. And this one's going to be largely ran by Tommy. So for those of
We'll
you
say
that
that.
Mhm.
for
Y'all got
those
a
of you
lot to add to this.
hey, for those of you that don't know, Tommy was handpicked, hand selected by 500 Startups, which is a large VC out of LA. I mean, out of Los Angeles, out of California. And they chose Tommy because of his digital marketing prowess and specifically because how much of a phenom he was in the YouTube advertising space. But overall, he's a phenomenal digital marketing strategist, is really what he wants to be known for. But they hand selected him. And the thing that he did for the companies over there is just amazing. So he's going to be able to tell us some amazing stories and give us insight that a lot of us just aren't exposed to. I think a lot of us have a lot of fear when it comes to even thinking about taking on investors or anything like that, bringing on some sort of outside entity that's going to have influence over how we conduct business day to day as e-commerce founders and business owners. And hell, I mean, whether you're in e-commerce, whether it's in business period, having some sort of outside entity come into your world and now, quote unquote, try to give you direction on how you need to move your business this way or that way can be one, uncomfortable, and two, there can be a lot of fear just because of, again, fear of the unknown. But we're going to jump into that later. And Tommy, I want to pass it to you. So what was it like getting that call and then being told, hey, we need your help? Like, this huge VC is saying that they need your help. That's crazy.
Didn't make sense. I was skeptical because, you're talking 2015, so limited mindset. And then our mindsets are always limited, right? That's why this whole idea of next level ambitions is like, it's a constant thing. We're always trying to get to the next, like our ambition to level up is a never ending cycle, right? Unless Elon or somebody
Right.
even then, like he still has ambition, you know what I mean? So it's a never ending thing.
Right.
But just like who I am now versus then, right? I'm speaking in limited mindset. I was skeptical because I'm like, y'all out there where y'all building these things, like why do y'all need little old me in Douglasville, Georgia, working in my basement? You know what I'm saying? Like,
because you said y'all are building these things. For the listeners, you guys may not notice, but they actually had someone on their team who was an engineer at
the
Google and YouTube.
The co-founder of 500 Startups, Christine, came from Google. He was a senior product engineer for YouTube when she left Google.
Mm.
So
she's on the team, and they have a problem with YouTube, with Google, with advertising on that platform. We're trying to figure out how to
problem. It wasn't a problem. It was just more wanting to expose their portfolio companies to this opportunity because a lot of them wasn't doing it. And then they didn't have anyone
advertising on that platform, right?
Right. And then they didn't have anyone.
And she couldn't think of anyone. And they had to find you.
That's why I said, that's why I was so confusing at first. Because there were people in the company at the time already that was already closely associated with Google, who had colleagues and friends and everything working at Google, high-ranking people over at Google.
Mm.
So to me, it just I couldn't connect the dots.
Right.
But they were wanting, so 500 Startups, and I don't want to go into soliloquy on that because it'll be completely off topic, but the short of it is they exist. What they were doing at the time was was running an accelerator which existed to help their portfolio companies and increase the probability that those companies would be successful, which then would increase the probability that they would become more valuable, which then increase the probability that they could get a return on their investment. In a nutshell, right?
Gotcha.
So their role was, we get the best of the best when it comes to every facet of what it takes to help a company be successful. In the growth department, YouTube happened to be this underutilized opportunity that everybody knew was being underutilized. It was being, it was just like no one was really maximizing that. So they set out to say, we need to have the best of the best help our portfolio companies with this particular component, which was YouTube. Again, so back to your point, y'all can think of nobody that's already out here that's doing that. But if you fast forward to now, it makes a lot more sense.
Exactly.
It makes perfect sense, right?
Yep.
We did not want, in 500 startups, for lack of a better word, was just a collection of vagabonds. You know what I'm saying? Like we just like Wild Wild West types. You know what I'm saying? But typically the best people are the ones who, you know what I mean? Like they were looking for someone who was able to do this without the advantage. They go get somebody that's already there, who already tapped in with Google. That person ain't got the same skill set as somebody like me who ain't had it as an advantage.
Right.
I didn't understand that at the time. I couldn't make that make sense. But looking back on it, it make perfect sense. You don't want the person with the advantage if you want to get the best. You want the most disadvantaged person that's been able to make something with this. That's who's gonna be your best, is the person with the least that's
a bar right there. Y'all gonna see that in reels and everything. That line right there.
I see. Okay.
Like, it's interesting because it really plays into this whole concept of we talked about this in previous episodes around like hiring like marketers from big brands versus hiring marketers who worked with small companies, scaled those companies to great heights, right? Absolutely. Like those marketers, the tools at their disposal are very, very different. There's a massive tech disparity between those two, right?
Absolutely.
And so you really, at the end of the day, you really want the person who can, put MacGyver something incredible, right?
Exactly.
Like without
and then consistently do that, right? Not just somebody who figured it out and had a success. They got a track record of doing that with the least, the least resources.
Especially because at the end of the day, a lot of this tech, like it's only as good as the marketer.
Absolutely.
Right. So,
but you gotta, which 500 startups, more and more over the years. And I tell y'all this all the time, like it changed my life, because you would think these companies out there, like, nope, these other companies were not thinking that way, which is why they win, bro, because they looking at it through a whole nother lens. And I know for me, having the opportunity, to be mentored by Dave and to be, having
his whole name now, because they don't know who Dave is. You saying Dave like it's
Dave McClure is one of the founders of 500 Startups. Christine Tsai is the other founder. They both came together to found 500 Startups. Dave McClure's background is he came out of PayPal. He was on the PayPal team.
PayPal Mafia.
He worked with the PayPal Mafia, Elon and all of those guys. And then he left when he left PayPal, he went with Peter Thiel with Founders Fund. That's how we got into the VC. That's how we kind of got started in the VC. Peter Thiel, if people don't know who that is, he was one of the early investors in Facebook. Peter Thiel has been connected to some of the biggest success stories in the history of Silicon Valley. Like he a pretty big deal.
Peter Thiel has a contract with the CIA, doesn't he? Isn't that
what
Palantir has different contracts?
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, Peter Thiel on but Founders Fund was like the model that they end up kind of building 500 off of, but they kind of like had this they had a more radical idea of 500, but Founders Fund was kind of sort of the framework that sprung them kind of into that concept. Well, not maybe completely, right? Because I don't want to speak for them, but just based on what I know, being able to engage with them, these are kind of like my thoughts, right? I don't want to, maybe Dave got a completely different perspective with Christine, but just from my perspective, that's kind of how I saw. And so they ended up, launching 500 startups together. So Dave, having been mentored by Dave, and I tell him this all the time, he's one of my mentors and somebody that changed my life. Mm-hmm. Dave's mentality was undervalued assets. Plain and simple. So his thing was like, look, when you know how to value something, then you can understand when you see something that's undervalued. You can't know undervalued asset truly if you don't properly know how to value something. And what I invest in is undervalued assets because I don't invest in things that I don't know how to value. But if I know that I understand the value of this and I know that it's under the value, I want to invest in that. And not only do I do that with companies, I do that with people. And I never forget, I don't guess I want to put this business out there with what we was doing, but we was having a conversation and it was like, we see people as undervalued assets. I believe you're way more valuable than what you believe you are.
Right.
So we take advantage of that. But that's what capitalism is.
Whoa. So he telling you to your face that they taking advantage of you. They taking advantage of your skill set.
But it wasn't coming from that place though, right? It was a teachable. Like for me, I felt like I was being taught.
Right.
So it didn't come at me like you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, there's levels to this game, right? It's one thing for you to be taken advantage of, and it's another thing in order for somebody to show you behind the veil. And that's what this was, right? Correct. This is a behind the veil moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. Which then, if we go back to the original conversation we started, why would y'all come get little old me out of Douglasville, Georgia? Right. It makes more sense. Undervalued asset, least resources, consistently being able to make something out of nothing.
Yeah.
That's exactly who we need. So it makes sense.
Right.
And that's the power of what that culture was about. And that's why it changed my life so much, because it made me look in the mirror at myself.
Right.
But then it also made me understand the value of what I had achieved thus far. Having an understanding of how to value things, and some things that ain't my lane, it ain't my lane. But when it comes to like what it is that I know value when I see it. I know overvalue and I know undervalue because I properly know how to value such thing, right? Which then, fast forward, we looking at e-commerce brands. We know value when we see it.
I was just getting ready to take you there and say, so one of the takeaways that we have today is like an introduction to valuations. Like how the hell as an e-commerce founder do I value my brand? I made $1 million in my e-commerce business last year. Am I worth $1 million? Is that how it works?
Nah, you know that. All of us can contribute to this part of the conversation, right? Because value, is all subjective at the end of the day. Value, honestly, what I learned, is what somebody's willing to pay.
Right.
It's what the market is willing to do.
Right. This is about to get juicy, y'all.
Yeah. So, but for me, being a data guy and, Kai as well, like all of us really like being super numbers driven. You can go out and see a pattern of behavior to determine your value based on all of the parameters of your business. What do businesses look like you? What are they getting?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's kind of like the first idea. Now, there's levels to that where you can have independent firms come in who have access to this data to evaluate your company and give you an independent, valuation based on what they believe, based on what the pattern of the data that exists in the market for what people typically pay for a company that has all of the things that you have.
Right.
But then there's this deeper discussion that we all can have is like, well, what do you have? Because some of y'all probably got stuff you don't even know that's valuable.
Right. Hold on.
Some of y'all got stuff you think that's valuable that ain't worth jack shit.
Right, that part.
So let's talk about that.
So hold on, bro. You saying my logo? The photo shoot that I took the other day, my branding, it ain't valuable?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying.
I done got my copyright for my name.
Hey.
You saying that ain't valuable?
Really?
Hey.
Oh my God.
I ain't saying that.
So
all I'm saying is maybe it is, maybe it ain't.
My Fashion Nova knockoff boutique that did $10 in the last 5 years. That ain't valuable.
Knockoff.
See what I'm saying?
So hold on. You said something. And here's an actionable step, right? So Tommy said that you can go out and look at other brands like your brand and see what those companies have sold for.
Yeah.
Where the hell do you do that at? Right. So like one place that I'm thinking of off the top of my head could be like what is it? Empire Flippers. So like that's one site. There's another site.
FE International, I think, is one of them. I think it's FE International.
Break both of those phonetically. Break those down.
Well, FE International is they do
I know how you spell that.
I think it's the letter F, the letter E, International. I don't know. I'd have to look it up real quick. I'm trying to think of the name.
Got you. So FE International.
I think it's FE. Yeah, F. The letter F as in Frank, E as in Emily, international.com.
Ah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And there's go ahead. And I was thinking there's another one too that comes to mind, like a quick one. So you have like Econ Flippers.
Yeah, it's another one too.
There's another one like Empire Flippers.
I mean, that's like Biz by Sell, but I don't really trust their data. Like, I ain't really no fan of that one for this type of thing.
But those are two great resources right there that you can use. And if we think of another one while we're on, we'll put that out there too. But those are great. Those are great sites that you can go to with good data. Now you can put in your company, and now you can get an idea of what your valuation is. Not only that, you can get an idea. And I want to jump ahead about what you should be thinking about when it comes down to selling your company too.
For sure.
So I think that's good too. We'll touch on that later. But go ahead, Tommy.
Well, now I was just gonna say in that whole lane, there's kind of two key ways, right? It's the EBITDA, and then you got seller discretionary earnings. Which most people, SDE. So those are two valuation mechanisms that most e-commerce brands are going to be.
What the hell is EBITDA?
EBITDA, EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes. No, am I saying it right? Earnings before interest, taxes, amortization,
depreciation and amortization.
There you go, Kai. So see, Kai got it. Yeah. So that. Kai, maybe you can explain that. I mean, I know what it is, but I think you know very well.
Go ahead, Kai.
Probably do a better explanation than me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really like a measure.
Into the Maryland Lynch. I mean,
no, y'all do all that. It's not necessary.
Into the eye baker.
It's honestly, it's just like a measure of a company's profitability, right?
Yeah.
Of operating business only, right? So like before any effects of like indebtedness, state mandated payments, what else? Like any costs that are required to maintain its asset base, right? So like that's at the end of the day kind of what it comes down to.
I just heard so like when I file my taxes, is this on my tax form? Like, is it the number after I pay all my taxes and everything?
So it's basically like your net income, your interest, your taxes, your depreciation, and your amortization.
Okay.
There's like a couple of different ways of like calculating it, of course, but it requires you, in short though, like it requires you to really have a full understanding of your numbers and your financials. This
so
is not
my
something
accountant, my accountant could get me this.
Absolutely.
Boom, there it is.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
There's your cheat code right there. So your accountant can get you this data. This won't sound foreign to your accountant. When you ask your accountant, like, hey, I need to figure out my EBITDA, your accountant's gonna be like, oh, okay, cool. Let's sit down and bust out these numbers. If not, then just find you another accountant.
Yeah.
Now
And it's useful the way that the accountants use it. It's kind of like a loose proxy for cash flow for like the entire company's ops.
Yep.
So
we want to add to
let's put a pin in cash flow because we're gonna come back to that later.
We definitely got to come back to that.
Definitely got to come back.
But EBITDA and then seller discretionary earnings. Those are you know, depending on your business, you know, the size of your company as well. You know, most I don't remember if it's like maybe 5-10 million or more before EBITDA is a thing. If you like under 10 million, they probably gonna look at seller discretionary earnings because you know, basically seller's discretionary earnings is basically like removing the fact that like you got like your revenue, then you got like the costs, then you got the operating expenses, and then you got owner compensation because you're paying yourself. So seller discretionary earnings take into the account, what if you wasn't having to pay yourself? What would the value be of this business removing you? Because you're basically selling this asset, you're not having to pay yourself anymore. You can actually be able to use that, you know, in the valuation process. But that's typically why it's smaller companies, because if you're making $1 million, $2 million a year, or whatever, you know, you probably got to pay yourself out of that. Versus, you know, larger companies, EBITDA is calculating your because most of us will pay ourselves out our own profit. But like the larger you get as a company, it's like more the salary is all baked into your operating expenses and not, you know, you're not running your company like you would normally. Like you're not, you know, making a profit and then just taking what, you know, going and doing an owner draw whenever you get ready. Because you got investors and you got other people on your team that own a piece of it and so forth and so on. So it's not like a singular decision to go say, oh, we made 10 million in profit this year, I'm gonna take 2 million out and go buy me a Bugatti. You know what I mean? Like if you own it 100%, you obviously you can do that. But typically when you start getting to these bigger company sizes, you know, there's more people who own a piece of that where, you know, the seller discretionary earnings is not going to make sense because that company is not being operated in that fashion. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Basically, like, so with EBITDA, it's used for like mid-sized businesses valuation, right? So, and mid-sized, you know, obviously can mean a lot of things.
It's
but
a big ass range.
It's like I would consider mid-sized like greater than $1 million in EBITDA. In EBITDA, not in like anywhere north and like that, but like we're talking about like greater than $1 million in EBITDA is like where you can start using, you know, EBITDA as this. If it's less than that though, that's SD, I think, all the way.
Gotcha. That make more sense. So anyway, that's kind of like valuations and, you know, kind of those components, you know, whatever the case may be. But Ty, I know you had put a pin. You had said it was
cash flow.
Because
that's going to take us into our next point, our next takeaway, which is like the keys to looking the most attractive to investors. So there's something, and we're also going to come back to something that you said earlier, which is understanding underperforming or unvalued assets. That's going to be key inside of your e-commerce business or inside of the business that you're running. So we're going to touch on that because that's going to feed into keys to looking most attractive to investors. So Tom, what do you think are like some of those keys? Is it the logo, the website? Like
ain't got none of that. Like ain't got none of that. I mean, look, you know, every investor got their own philosophy and thesis. You know what I'm saying? But I think if we're just looking at, you know, kind of like the common traits, you know, they want to see growth. Like there's an opportunity to grow, right? There's a path to profitability. Some people they might not care if you're profitable, but they want to know that there's a path to that.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it's basically this, you know, like Dave McClure taught me, you know, and it blew my mind. It was so simple, yet it was like mind blowing at the same time. It's like buy low, sell high, bro. That's all we doing.
Mm.
And I'm like, what? Buy low, sell high.
They
You know
say
what I'm saying?
they say a master know how to simplify. That's a simple way of looking at it.
That's all it is, bro. And he was like, if I gave you $1 million for 10% of your company right now, how much would that be what would your valuation be? Right. I'm using air quotes.
Right.
So that made me worth 10 million. He was like, right. Now let's assume no dilution, no nothing. And you turned around and sold that company for 100 million. How much you got to write a check to me for? I said 10 million. So I bought at $1 million and sold at 10. I was like, bro, it can't be that simple. He was like, it's that simple.
Now hold on. Let me take you back. You said dilution. What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, well, I don't know if we got time to get in all.
I mean, give us something light. You ain't gotta give us something light.
Well, let me let you answer that question, Mr. Investor, because you done been diluted, haven't you not?
I have been diluted, bro. Why you got to throw me under? Yeah, they don't even know I'm being thrown under. They're like, what y'all talking about? What y'all diluting over there?
I'm just saying you ain't got to tell the names and all of that, but I'm saying you can speak from experience. I think
exactly.
I think it'll give more context to it to speak from experience on that.
Absolutely.
On that word.
Absolutely. So I invested into an e-commerce brand, and we actually invested into two companies. One was a podcast. One became a podcast network. I'm not sure what they're doing today. And then the other brand is still on Forbes and doing all this other amazing type stuff. But when I invested into the brand, let's just say that I had 5%. I had a 5% stake in the brand. Well, two major VCs came and invested into that brand as well. And when they came and invested into the brand, I went from having 5% in the brand to down to, let's just say, 3.5% of the brand ownership. So that's what dilution looks like. So you can just because you get diluted, it's not really a bad thing per se, because the value of the thing is worth so much more now than when it was when you initially put your money into it. So that's a big thing too. Is like, is the company growing, or are you just being diluted to, quote unquote, nothing? So that's what dilution looks like. If you want to add anything else to it, please go ahead.
Nah, that was a great explanation. That's a simplified way to kind of get that point across. I mean, because it's a lot more rabbit hole to it, right? And
absolutely.
I know for me, when I first got introduced to the idea of valuation, somebody explained it simply to me, but I still had to make it make sense to me. Like I was overthinking it, to be honest with you, but it was so many other factors of this game that I didn't understand to really add real context to it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even the buy low, sell high thing, right? To Dave, it was that simple. But to me, it was way more complex than that. It can't be that simple.
Right.
But that's because I didn't have the context of all of the other pieces yet. You know what I'm saying? Because this is early in my 500 startup journey.
Right.
So by the time I'm really getting all of this game and they dropping all of these things on me, you know what I'm saying? Dilution and cap tables and this and that and all of this kind of stuff. I'm having to make sense of all of this stuff. That's when it started making the simplification of it made more sense to me, because the context that needed to go with that for it to make sense so simply really connected. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think it's be impossible for us to do that in one setting right now.
Absolutely.
But just understand that that's part of the equation, the word, that word dilution.
Right. Yeah. Dilution. Another word you just used was cap table.
Cap table.
So you just dropped that on us. So Kai or Tommy, y'all want to talk about the cap table? Or just what it is?
I mean, simply it's just a list of all people who have ownership in a company and what percentages that they hold. And how many shares or whatever the case may be that each person has, right?
Right.
It can be one person on your cap table. If you own 100%, you can have 20 or 100. You can have hundreds of people on the cap table,
right?
Because so many people can own a piece of a company. You can own fractional shares of a company, even, right? Like if you buying stock, like on these stock platforms and stuff like that.
Whatever.
Yeah, you just buying fractional shares of companies. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times. So, I mean, it's basically the same thing, but the cap table would just be the list of all of those people. In essence, that's basically what it is. And I know Jay-Z kind of was talking about that recently.
Exactly.
One of the songs he dropped or whatever the case, and people was like going crazy, and it's like, oh, this went over my head and all of this. And that was mind blowing to me, dog, because I didn't, like I had never been exposed to that word either. So it kind of makes sense. But I guess sometimes you take for granted what you've been exposed to. Because to see how we was reacting as a culture to that.
Exactly.
Made me really realize what the splits is. I wasn't exposed. Yeah, what the splits is, right?
What the splits is.
And it made me realize how much.
What is he talking about? What the splits is? What is he talking about?
That's what the cap table is. Who own what?
Mm-hmm.
What the split is.
How does
if the three of us own a company and we all own it equally,
is being split up.
Huh?
The percentage. It's a breakdown of the percentages. The percentage split of how this company is being divided via these shares. That's exactly what the splits is that Jay-Z was talking about.
Exactly. But if you don't understand the lingo, the language of it, the nuance of it, the context of it go over your head.
Absolutely.
Which is to me, I fully got it, but seeing the landscape of how we was reacting as a culture, is like nobody understands what a cap table is.
Right.
Which I didn't either now.
Right.
But again, this 2015.
Right.
So we in 2022.
Right.
I forgot about little stuff like that. I forgot. Once I saw that, then it made sense to me because I had to go back to the time. It's like, wait a minute. Then nobody that looked like me never dropped that game on me either.
Right.
No wonder we acting like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it took somebody that looked like us to drop that game on us for it to connect. You know what I mean?
Right. And what's so powerful about that too is, and this is on the other side of the conversation, right? We're gonna slightly jump over to the other side of the conversation, but as somebody that has capital and you're thinking about investing, the reason why you hear Jay-Z saying it the way that he says it, right? He's like, I'm at the cap table, what the splits is, right? It's really like about, how much money you have to bring to the table, regardless of what they're saying that is worth. Like there's room for negotiation.
Absolutely.
That's kind of really what you're hearing when he say like what the splits is, like because like really like I know what y'all saying that this thing may be worth, but I know what I'm bringing to the table because as an investor, you could potentially be bringing more than just money to the table, influence, power, trade agreements that you can tap this business into. So there's a lot of strategic advantage that you can bring to the table too, and that has value and that carries weight.
I mean, look, you might as well go and get into it, right? When you talk about the investor relationships and stuff,
that's true. That's the next one. Because between the investor and the founder.
Because I mean, and then there's this other underlying issue that we want to get into about people who don't even, want to take on investors because they scared somebody gonna, take their company and all this kind of stuff, right?
I can't tell you how many times I've heard that.
They gonna try to take my company.
Like what?
Should we just go ahead and get into it now?
I mean, if we want to now, we can come back.
No. We're gonna hit the reality between the investor and the founder.
Well, yeah. So if we just kind of go to that, right? It's like having an investor, you know what I'm saying, and having that relationship between the two. Like sometimes investors are looking for an advantage that they don't have that you're gonna give them. That's not purely about the money or the growth of your company. I'm gonna give you a perfect example. I invested in a Black-owned hemp farm. What I'm looking for in that investment is information. They have vertical integrated. They already have a vertically integrated infrastructure from being able to grow it out of the ground to manufacturing to fulfillment to product to packaging, the whole shebang direct to consumer. They already have this infrastructure built out.
Right.
And they are doing it at large volumes compared to what I know. Now, is it large volumes in the industry as a whole? They got some work to do. But from what I've seen before, the level that I want to operate in the space, they already got their infrastructure. And now they just need to duplicate the infrastructure. So the value of that information and access to that type of knowledge is very high for me. So me making that investment, I'm getting that. I'm getting access to their relationships. I'm getting opportunity when the company grows, the value of the company grows. I'm gonna benefit from that side. right?
Mhm.
Like it's all of these things that I'm getting as an investor. And then on the flip side for them, they want to be able to take my money, but more importantly, it wasn't really about the money from me for them. It's access to the knowledge and information I have, the resources, and all of the strategic advantage that they're going to get by having somebody like me on their cap table, right?
And just to say real quick too, like just as an aside, so that people understand like why Tommy even cares about like a vertically integrated company or like
Right.
Yeah, I kind of
like,
skated past that, didn't
like that is it's major. First of all,
huge
for all investors, whether they're in it for just kind of the revenue returns or whether they have, you know, other interests, like vertical integration is massive. It essentially means that you have a negative cash conversion cycle. Cash conversion cycle is like basically how long it takes you to get cash, convert it to product, and then convert it back in cash, right?
Yes.
So it's like when you have to outlay cash and then when you get it back. So it's immense from like a cash flow perspective, from a scalability perspective, like from it's everything, and it's rather it's rather uncommon. It's not as common among like smaller companies, because oftentimes like the e-commerce brands, you know, you're working with a manufacturer, you got suppliers over here, you might have multiple suppliers to essentially kind of assemble a product, right? And so investors really love seeing vertically integrated companies because they know that there's a lot of bottlenecks that often take place with companies that are not vertically integrated, that typically vertically integrated companies aren't going to have to deal with. And then just again, like that cash conversion cycle is just, it becomes so much easier and faster to scale with.
Yeah.
So I just want to throw that out
like
there.
that. You're right. I mean, and then in the conversation of being able to exit, like the exit potential for vertically integrated versus not is like night and day.
It's huge.
I mean, you can't even put it in the same league. You know what I mean? Because the risk profile for a company that's not vertically integrated, when I'm buying that company, when someone's acquiring that, they're acquiring that risk because of they don't have that. What happens with those relationships now that we've become, you know, owners or whatever the case? How strong are your contracts and so forth and so on, right? So they got to evaluate the risk of that, and then they're going to factor that into what they're going to be willing to pay. But when you got the vertical integration, that risk goes away. Yeah, you still got to do manufacturing and you still got to, you know, do grows and all of these other things. But because you have the infrastructure and you got, especially if you got SOPs and things like that in play, now it's really just saying, well, we just need to get talent because we got the systems already in place to just plug the people in. Yeah, there's way less risk associated that, which then you can command a higher price.
There you go.
You know what I mean? So yeah, vertical integration is, I mean, again, one of the biggest reasons why I did that investment is because they are vertically integrated in a space that I want to be in. And where am I going to get that information at? Because it ain't that many people out here operating like that. So it made too much sense to me. If I pay X amount of dollars, the kind of motherfucking money we be forking over for these masterminds, why wouldn't I give them that money? A, they look like me. B, they got the information that I want. Like, I want to know how to do that. Normally, you would have to pay all this kind of money to go to a mastermind. For less than what I would probably pay for a mastermind, I was able to invest in this company, and now I got direct access to that information. So that's kind of how I looked at it. You know what I mean? Because if I would have gave it to a mastermind, I wouldn't have had no upside opportunity. That company can't sell for 100 million one day and I get a check. You know what I'm saying? It would have just been, I'm giving money, I'm getting the information, which is cool. Like, I ain't shitting on masterminds because I'm gonna keep doing them. But I had to look at it through that lens. For me, I just was like, if I wanted this information, I would pay this kind of money to go do a mastermind. Why not? At the very least, it's worth it for the information, but I'm also going to get all of these other benefits. I need to make this happen.
And I think that's key to founders that's listening, is about the, you know, when you're bringing on investors, like, what does that offer actually look like? And it's not just, and as you just saw, Tommy spent more time talking about these other things that probably wasn't even being presented to him, probably wasn't even on the table. But as a savvy investor, he was just trying to see, am I going to be able to get access to these things?
Yes.
And he is going to be able to get access to those things, right?
Absolutely.
And obviously, as and from an investor standpoint, if there are key things that you want to get access to, information, who the other investors are, and so on and so forth. Because one of the reasons why I invested into the company that I invested into was because of a lot of things that Tommy said. One, information, and two, access to the other investors that had invested into the company. I wanted these other relationships that were just outside of investing. So as back to the investors, investing can be another type of networking opportunity that's at a very high caliber level. So, not, and it's not really similar to a mastermind, because you both have invested into this company, so you both have things at stake, and you both have something exponential to gain from this business. I mean, that's somewhat similar to being inside a mastermind, but at the end of the day, you guys are actually making an investment together into this brand. So your ability to get close with those type of people is going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot better, and you're going to be able to build some amazing relationships by getting into these brands. So that's something else to think about too. So as you're collecting, from the founder standpoint, as you're collecting investors, if you can get investors that have a lot of notoriety, it's gonna be great for the follow-on investors that come behind them. It's gonna make you more sexy.
So I think so let's like switch gears a little bit into like the POV rather of the founder.
Yeah.
When it comes to like the relationship between investors and founders. I feel like this kind of lends itself to that whole concept of, oh, well, what if they just steal my company, or oh, I don't want them telling me what to do,
right,
or XYZ, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to dive into this a bit, because you hear some stories. It's not like it doesn't happen, right?
That's true.
You hear some things out there, and I think that they end up serving as like cautionary tales kind of thing, right? Like it's and people get a little bit scared, but the reality is if you are selecting your investors wisely, and if you really understand the game from the investor perspective as well, I think that founders are going to be better off in terms of the decision making, as to whether or not to raise capital, whether or not they should go for that second, third round. How involved do they want investors to be in their business, and all that great stuff. They'll be able to better navigate that entire space. So I don't know, Ty, like, as somebody who is an investor, obviously all three of us have worked with VCs, but like, I think that it'd be interesting to get your perspective, given you are both an investor in e-commerce and you are also an e-commerce founder.
Right. I think we have to set it up too for for folks listening to the cautionary tales, right? Like, first off, those founders have typically diluted themselves, right? So they went from having 100% control of their company to now they may be down to like 40%, 30%, or what have you, ownership of the company. What is Elon? I'm not Elon, but Jeff Bezos. How much of Amazon does Jeff own now?
Like 11, I think.
Like 11%. Like Jeff Bezos owns like 11%, right? But still has full control.
Of a lot, though.
Right, exactly, right. But still has full control of Amazon. He's still running Amazon. So I think part of what happens too is when you dilute yourself beyond the 50% mark, right? Now the other investors that sit on your cap table can collude against you and now force you out, especially if you've been underperforming, right? So if you haven't been hitting your benchmarks that you sold investors on, right? You told them, okay, well, if I continue on this trajectory with this type of marketing campaign, doing this, that, and the third, we're going to hit these numbers, and ultimately your money is going to be worth more. That's what brought you in, and that's what they got you in on. So now, as the founder, if you're not hitting those numbers, and the investors think that they can find somebody else that they can put in there that can hit those numbers, then they will be trying to collude against you to try to push you out of the company. So that needs to be the first thing. So one, if you're not in that position, if you still own 100% of your company, or if you sell a piece of it, it's only going to be 10% or 5% or whatever, then you really don't have to worry about that, right? Now on the so that's the founder fear. Another, I think the fear also comes from is that you think by taking on investors' cash, you think by taking on that investors' cash, that investors now is empowered to now come in and start telling you how to, run your Facebook ads, or how to, or how to. Here's the reality. The investor does not have the time to come in and run your business, run your day-to-day operations, and look into all of the things that's going on into your business and start telling you that you need to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning versus you waking up at 7 or 8 or 10 or whatever it is that you
Not
wake
no
up.
legit investor.
I have never, not once, received a phone call from an investor of a client asking me for reports.
For nothing.
Like it
Right.
doesn't happen.
It's that it does it right. It's not nobody. They just don't have the time at the end of the day. That's another reason why they invested into you, because they
Absolutely.
believe that what you have been doing up to this point has been phenomenal.
Yep.
And hopefully if you keep doing it, or as you grow and make changes along the way that you need to make to continue to make this business valuable and profitable, then you're going to continue to do those things, right? And if you do run into some roadblocks, or if something happens that stops you from doing that, that's when this whole relationship between investor and the founder really comes into play, because hopefully maybe the investor may have some other resources or access to some other things to help get you out of that hard spot. Maybe it's information, or maybe it's relationships that they have, but it could be something key that can get you out of a bad situation. Going back to the vertical integration thing, maybe you aren't vertically integrated, and maybe the supplier that you have been dealing with is now trying to increase your price, which is going to hurt you from scaling. So guess what? You may hit that investor up, and he may be like, oh yeah, there's somebody else that I've been dealing with, and we already have an amazing contract with them. We can bring you in under that agreement. And guess what? Now your prices are lower than what they were when you was dealing with your other manufacturer. So there's a lot of different back and forth that can happen. That's why you will always want to keep the conversation open between your investors, between your investors and yourself, because as you're just sharing different things with them, challenges, and you're sharing the wins with them, they may be able to come in and help you, and not necessarily quote unquote come in and roll up their sleeves, but they may be able to introduce you to somebody, or they may be able to give you a bit of information or give you a resource or something that can help you out of that tough situation. Because at the end of the day, they are literally invested in you winning at the end of the day. So them coming in and telling you what to do on the day in and day out, they don't have the time to do that.
Nah,
I mean, and even in situations where investors are saying, "Hey, you should do XYZ," or no, because that does happen, because they are supposed to be there for you from like somewhat of a mentorship capacity. Some of them, right?
Right.
But I think it's also worth mentioning, like, sometimes you don't really want to listen to all of your like, especially when it comes to marketing, right? Like, unless your investor has a marketing background,
right?
And when I say marketing background, I'm not talking about like they worked at L'Oreal. I always pick on L'Oreal. I don't know why. Perfectly fine company, but
you don't want no smoke.
It's always on the forefront of my head. But like, just because they, once upon a time worked for some big brand company in their marketing department does not at all mean that they have all of the insights that you need to be able to do whatever it is that you're looking to do, whatever your goals are from a marketing perspective or advertising perspective. So I would absolutely bear that in mind as well. I think that, you want to turn to investors based off of their backgrounds with respect to various, subjects. So like if you are having some challenges on the, operations side of things, or if you're having challenges with manufacturing and you happen to have an investor who is like a pro in the manufacturing space, right? That's an excellent person to have those conversations with.
Right.
Just, it sounds basic, but just use a level of discernment, because I can't tell you how many times I have had conversations with e-commerce founders who are saying, okay, well, I know you told me to do this 2 months ago, but then I talked to one of my investors and he said, do this other thing. And then like 2 months after that, like they're in trouble. Right. So, so that's really, really important too. Just having a level of discernment about, which investor you should be having what types of conversations with, and always keeping in the back of your mind like what their area of expertise is, and what their how they made their bread, right?
Right.
Like
Yep.
so, on that to determine, kind of what sorts of nuggets you should be pulling from them and implementing.
And somebody else says something that's key too, which is like recency. So like that worked when.
Right,
It's like another key thing too. Like like that worked when. So like when is the last time you saw that work?
Like, did that work in 92?
Right.
Yeah.
Did that work in 2020?
There's another spicy take on this too.
Ooh.
So y'all remember Jeff at the retreat that Damien brought in, his homeboy?
Yep.
So I was talking with him when we was in Texas at an event together at WebinarCon, and me and him got to chopping it up because he was like, I thought I saw you, right?
Mhm.
I had heard of him years ago, but we had never like formally met. But one of the things that he was saying to me, and I think this is something that a lot of people aren't willing to do when it comes to this whole conversation around investors and stuff, maybe you ain't the best person to be running your company. Because what Jeff said to me was, I know I ain't the best person to take these companies. Because I was asking him, like, why do you want to keep making these companies and buying these companies and selling them? Because that's where he felt like his strength is. He's like, I'm not the best person to take these companies where they need to go. And I understand that. What I'm good at is identifying companies that have potential, but they're lacking certain things. So either we can launch them or we can acquire them and we can put them in the position where they're attractive to someone who can take it where it need to go.
Right.
And in one of the instances, one of his companies, he said he sold, he didn't sell all of it. But not only is someone else took that company, running that company, he got a payout from that. He also still collecting from that because now that company is operating way further than he could have took it.
Right.
But he had the mindset to understand that and was willing to do what was required to still maximize what he can get, because he wasn't sitting up there worried about somebody taking my company or whatever. He looking at it from a lens of, I know what my strengths are, and I ain't the best person to be running this. Let me put this in somebody else's hand. They're going to do way more with it than I will, and I'm still going to be way better off. And some people ain't willing to put themselves in that mindset because they think that they the best thing for the company to be what it is, and that might not even be true.
And that's a really good point. I think that especially like through the lens of the VC, from the VC's perspective, right? There may very well come a time where it makes sense to replace the existing CEO, who is the founder of the company, with a CEO with an MBA or some sort of other background that can really take the company at that point to massive heights. That is not only does it happen, but it happens with a pretty decent amount of regularity, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because it's not like they have kicked you out on the street penniless, right? It just means that you are no longer the person that's running day to day, right? You've taken the company as far as it can go, and you're still you still have ownership and all that other great stuff, right? But oftentimes I think, especially for founders that are starting off, like they're from the creative space, right? Like creatives in particular don't always have like a level of business acumen to be running a 50 million, 100 million,
absolutely
300 million, $2 billion company.
Right.
So at some point you're gonna wanna go hang out on the beach or go pursue other projects or go start another company, or you're gonna wanna go do other things. And VCs fully understand that because that's just human people. They fully get that, and they have a sense of kind of, okay, well, what are the indicators, right? What are the indicators that it's time to perhaps start looking for another CEO. And that doesn't, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it happens due to underperformance, right? But at the end of the day, like, if this is this thing that you've birthed, right? It's basically your child at this point, right? Like, you're gonna want it to soar and grow and prosper and all of that stuff. So You know, I think that
Gotta look in the
there's
mirror though.
That's what I was just getting ready to.
Sometimes
you,
you know, that could be on the horizon, and you know, it's hurtful to you and you don't want it to happen, but deep down inside of you, you know they probably right.
Right.
The sooner you can look in the mirror and speak that to yourself, maybe you the one that can bring that to the forefront and say, hey,
yes,
I think it's time for us to, you know, put somebody else in the driver's seat. What do you guys think about that? Like,
yes,
you know, let's put our heads together and come up with a game plan on that.
Yes. That's what I was just getting ready to say.
A lot of people ain't willing to do that, bro. That's why when Jeff said that to me, I was like, man, that's pretty dope. That he, you know, just the mindset that he had. I really admired that.
Right. And I think there's something deep, there's something deeper here too, and it's about a sense of self, right?
Yes.
This whole thing about this company is my baby, like, you know, like you're literally saying that, you know, you birthed this thing out of you, and now this is a child that's supposed to be around you forever. But we all know that children grow up, get married, move out of the house, and kind of do, you know, do their own thing and call you on the weekends or something crazy, right?
They get married, they merge, they have
they have babies.
All kinds of stuff,
So
right?
you're not supposed, you know, and again, once they do that, your number one job as a parent now is like to become mentor and like to kind of, you know, kind of feed them information as they request it from you, as they access it, but you're not lording over their lives. And I think going back to what you said, Tommy, is that if you as the founder, one can look inside the mirror and say, okay, once this company gets to this point, I don't want to run the company anymore. Or number two, where I see this company can go. One, either I don't have access to the network, I don't have access to the resources, I don't have access to whatever the case may be. There may be certain things that you just don't have access to, relationships, and you know, relationships is probably the biggest thing at that level, and maybe just know-how, because we're going to move into the next thing, which is going to be mergers and acquisitions. You know, getting into that space. So maybe you don't have the background in the mergers and acquisition space, and how to evaluate a deal, how to properly buy a company, even merge with a company, and the right companies to do that with. So if you know that may not be a strong point, fall back. It was a Jewish guy that a friend of mine had met down in Panama, and the guy told him, he says, I own 100% of 10 companies. And the guy was like, what? And he was like, yeah. He said, I own 10%. He said, I own 10% of 10 different companies. Oh. So he grew these companies, and he owns 10% of these companies. So essentially he has 100% of, like, you know, all of these companies or whatever, right? He has 100%. And essentially he was telling them, like, sell it, but always keep 10% of the company. Because now you're always in there. So, and this is so it can be the same thing for anybody that's looking to, quote unquote, be moved out, be taken out of the CEO spot or whatever the case may be. One, it's not your my point is, one is this isn't you. The company is not you. You are you, and remind yourself that. And now that you sold, let's just say 90% of the company, or you're no longer the CEO, that frees you up to now live life more and be more of you. Whatever it is that's in you that allowed you to take this company from nothing to where other people want to buy it, and other people want to run it, and other people want to keep it on its trajectory. That is phenomenal. Go out and find more resources and tools to be able to feed that version of you, because that version of you is phenomenal. So let that be that. And two, just understand that, again, there's resources, access, and tools that you don't have that somebody else has that make them perfect for now taking this company to the next level.
Yes, sir.
I think we're at time.
Man.
I think we still
for another day.
We still want to squeeze in mergers and acquisitions.
Still want to squeeze it in?
Yeah, we need to get that on in there.
Okay, well, that's good. That's because that kind of goes back to the first point. Like, you know, what makes you know, the keys to looking the most attractive to investors.
Absolutely.
So being able to merge and being able to acquire other tools and resources of companies and bring them into the fold of your brand is phenomenal. So, Tommy, I'll let you go ahead and jump.
Well, I mean, you know, there's a lot to unpack here, and I know we probably won't get to get into all of it, but I think the key to it is when we talking about this whole exit thing, you know, mergers and acquisitions can be used both ways, right? To be as an exit strategy, or to strengthen your positioning for exit, right?
Right.
So one of the key pieces of game I got on mergers and acquisitions was again 500 startups.
Mm-hmm.
Emily, her name, I can't recall Emily's last name, but she was at 500 startups. They brought her in for the M&A side of the business. And one of the games that she dropped on me was that if you are looking to strengthen the positioning of your ability to exit, you need to start having conversations with M&A firms, because M&A firms have clients that are looking to buy things, and they got a set of criteria of what they're looking for.
Right.
And if you can get that information, you can build your company in such a way that will be attractive to be acquired by these types of companies that are buying them. And I just thought it was just game, like she was just gaming me up on that, just on how, like, you know, especially like some of these big companies like the Googles of the world who can write them big checks, because it ain't a lot of them. But like they have companies that they work with directly who have a list of criteria that's out trying to find the types of stuff that they're looking to buy.
Right.
And if you can have access to that, your company might not be what need to check all of those boxes, but you can either go and do these things, or you could go acquire other companies to check a box to strengthen your position, right?
Right.
Or a couple of companies, or maybe you can merge with another company. You could put 2 or 3 companies together that checks all of those boxes. But if you're not really, you know, have access to this information, you're not going to know that. So if you know that you want to strengthen your positioning, the sooner you know that you're starting to do that, you want to start seeking out M&A firms and start having these conversations, because a lot of times they got the game on exactly what, you know, the activity that their clients are looking to do, you know, in this space, and they can be a super valuable asset. That was kind of the game that she dropped on me, and I just thought it was some amazing game. So
no, that is amazing. And if you're listening to this, you're like, well, I'm not even thinking about, you know, selling my company. I'm never going to sell my company, yada yada. Here's another strategic advantage of
build it to sell it.
Hey, here's another strategic advantage of even listening to this. You can now start to do this research and start to discover these companies and see that they're doing things that you wish you would be, that you wish that you were doing in your business, that you may not be doing in your business, that could take your business to a whole nother level. So just by involving yourself, just by exposing yourself to this information and exposing yourself to some of the strategies that these companies are using to exit, it's going to make your company more valuable and more profitable, whether you choose to sell it or not. So it's definitely worth your time investing into, looking into, and exposing yourself to this information.
And
look, really, it's about this, right?
Like, at the end of the day, like the tenets of scalability are very similar to the tenets of like the list, right? The list that investors look at when they're determining, okay, is this a company that I want to invest in? All right. So even if you decide not to sell, to Ty's point, you're still going to want to be evaluating your company off of this, you know, checklist, as it were.
100%.
So we should really dive into kind of like what that, from at a granular level, what that looks like. That's going to have to be another
that's a whole other
But like we're talking about, like, I guess I'm talking about things like what your like your OpEx is, right, as a percentage of revenue.
Your operation expenses, she's saying.
Yeah, like how to decrease your lead times, right? Like things like this are things that investors are going to be asking about, and they're going to be interested in, and they also happen to lend themselves to greater profitability, smoother scaling when it comes to, you know, advertising, marketing, all that great stuff. And just the growth of your business overall. So I think that, you know, it still is super, super applicable and super relevant for sure.
Tommy, go ahead. What you about to say?
Nah, Kai basically said it. I mean, it's, you know, regardless of whether you want to sell or not, you should be pursuing this knowledge only because, like, because you always, especially if you are the decision maker of what happens with your company, what's wrong with seeing what's out there? But you still got the option to say, no, I don't want to do that. Right? Can't nobody make you do nothing you don't want to do. And ain't no investor gonna hold no gun in your head. Like they ain't trying to be out here doing that. Right? So it's like the only thing that's going to come out of that is you're going to be some realizations about some things you probably need to work on to make your business better, even whether you sell it or not. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, most of us, and I can't speak for everyone, but most of the people that I know are starting companies. It's bigger than just creating a job for themselves.
Right.
They trying to create some type of legacy. You know what I'm saying? And if you really on some legacy stuff, it makes too much sense for you not to to actually. It don't make sense for you to not pursue this information.
Right.
It's only going to give you insights to stuff that you wouldn't otherwise even be thinking about, like talking to an M&A firm. Right. Even if you ain't going to sell, you can reach out and let them know, like, I don't know if I'm ever going to sell, but if I were thinking about that, what are some of the things that, a potential acquirer would be looking for? Or it might just be like, I don't know what kind of businesses that you deal with. Who do you know that deal with companies like me? Because, every M&A firm ain't created equal, right? Some of them are tech, they strictly software, or maybe they this or maybe they that, right? So you'd have to, but if you get one, you have the conversation. It's a small world. You could probably get a referral to someone that's in the lane that you're in that'll be happy to give you some game, because they eat, sleeping, and breathing this.
Exactly.
And they're looking to build relationships because they know that I can't get to you when you're ready to sell. I need to reach you and build a relationship before you're ready to sell, because chances are when you're ready to sell, that relationship, you're going to do that with somebody you got a relationship with, not with somebody that you don't trust. Because these are really emotional things that are happening when it shouldn't be as much emotion involved in them, but they are. They're very emotional.
Absolutely.
Most people that go through this process, they want to deal with people that they can trust. So a lot of them are looking to build these relationships. You know what I mean? So
this is key. So this is one of those things where, can I take you to dinner? Can I take you to lunch and pick your brain? This is where one of those things are going to work at an extraordinarily high level. So the type of conversation that you're going to be having with this M&A person, the value that you're going to be getting is going to be through the roof. I want to take a step back to the whole, I'm not ready to sell, so why is this valuable to me? If you're in the situation where you're comfortable, the e-commerce money is now coming in, the ROAS is good, and the money is just building up inside the account, and you just kind of sort of just taking your hands off the wheel. This is also going to be good for you to figure out, what is the next step for me? What does the next level look like? Again, we're not talking about you selling, but it's just trying to figure out, what is the next step? What is the next level for me? Because I'm out here looking at stuff, and I already see the type of stuff that all of the gurus and the people showing up in the ads or whatever are talking about. Now you can get to a very real place to where you know that these are things that businesses did to actually sell their company. Other savvy people went through the books and everything else and found this company to be extremely valuable, more valuable than even you're evaluating your company right now. And this was the tactic, this was the strategy, this is the advertising play that they used to get there. Now you can take some of that money that you're sitting on, and now you can start to plan out the next step in your business, or the next strategies that you should deploy in your business while you're quote unquote fat and happy. That's another reason why you should look into this.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, we've talked about vertical integration a little bit, so I'm going to use that as an example. So yes, vertical integration is a super, super attractive to investors. However, the reason why it's super attractive to investors is really more fundamental, right? And it's the reasoning is applicable to any e-commerce brand, regardless of whether you want to exit or not. So like, for example, like, if you are in a position where you are seeking vertical integration, that'll help you like mitigate your brand risk. It'll help you alleviate shipping bottlenecks, port bottlenecks. Like, I mean, especially if you're doing numbers in e-com, you understand how big of a pain in the ass that is. And then it just also gives you, like, your brand a more dynamic ability to scale up and scale down as necessary. Right. And when I say scaling up and scaling down in production in real time, that happens sometimes, right? Like, if you, for whatever reason, let's say you've got a marketing agency or a marketing team that didn't quite hit those numbers for that product launch, for example, if you had a product launch that didn't meet expectations, like you can actually kind of hedge a little bit, and you can scale down production in real time to adjust.
But if you bought a billion units already and they only sold 100,000, you got to find a way to get rid of them 900.
Exactly.
So, and that's with respect to like any platform performance swings. This is something that vertical integration at its fundamental level helps in a way insulate you from channel volatility.
Absolutely.
And there's probably like a whole, I mean, not probably, there definitely is a whole melange of like other elements that can help insulate you from channel volatility. But I think that at the end of the day, seeking out these sorts of strategies and figuring out, okay, well, what do investors care about will put you in a direct line with, okay, what are the things necessary to help improve my brand scalability? And so if you can think about kind of this conversation, this podcast episode from that lens, I think that you'll still be immensely valuable. I mean, if you're fat and happy as an e-commerce brand, you should be looking at vertical integration. If you're fat and happy as an e-commerce brand who already is vertically integrated, then you should be looking at vertical integration with local manufacturing that's local to the audiences that buy your stuff, which is a whole nother level. Right. So,
or turn around and expanding on that vertical integration to see how other brands can be coming to you for their manufacturing needs. That's
right. Now you've got a whole another manufacturing business. Right. So like there's levels to these levels.
And another thing with the vertical integration now on the back end, you can now create products for just people that have already brought your stuff. So now you're creating more products on the back end for that you can cross sell and upsell the people that are buying on the front end,
which only then further insulates your channel, your resistance to channel volatility.
You can spin off other brands.
It becomes a whole. I mean, we should probably.
I'm just gonna put it out there. We hot right. We hot right now. If you got a funnel and everything that's working, and let's just say you got 3 front end products that are working. You could literally bust that piece of the business down and turn around and sell that funnel. Now you still got your company and you did an exit of a piece of a company because your brand may be called XYZ. Meanwhile, this little product line right here may be called, ZDF or whatever. Now ZDF becomes this whole little LLC, and now you sell that. And now guess what? You just sold that, but you're still providing the manufacturing and supply for XYZ brand.
Yes, sir.
Come on now.
Come on now. It gives you a lot of flexibility.
Good.
Don't make us show out on the podcast now.
A lot of places to go.
Yeah.
And that's how you build empires.
Yes.
Right. At the end of the day, I think that when we definitely, through the entire course of this podcast, the whole aim is to really get into like these elements that help you become more scalable.
This real game. This real game.
This is part of that. This is like a fundamental cornerstone of true scalability.
We showing out.
We are.
We showing out.
Showing out.
This been a great episode because we've all been able to shine through with all of these different, kind of direction around this topic to be able to like really hit it from a lot of direction. Like this mastermind, like this stuff, you ain't even getting in these masterminds.
Nope.
I done been in them.
Right.
They ain't really dropping this type of information on people. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, like I very rarely even hear someone say vertical integration.
At all.
When I hear them say that, I be like, oh yeah, let me talk to them.
What you're talking about. Yeah.
Right.
Just to even if they don't know about it, the fact that they've been exposed to it is enough to make me be like, let me see what they talking about. Let me tap in with them.
Right.
Because to even speak on it with even some level of understanding is a whole thing. It's a whole thing. It's easier said than done to get done, but the value is one of them things, right? It's like really hard to do, but so fucking worth it. Like some stuff is really hard to do, and it's just sometimes it ain't worth it. Right. It's one of them things where I don't think there's ever an instance where it wouldn't be worth it.
Right.
Unless you just an imbecile. You know what I mean? Right. Like, because the amount of flexibility and and stuff that you get is just, it's incredible. Like, man, because channel volatility is a whole fucking podcast episode.
Yeah, this is one of them things that you do that you heal a whole generation. You talk about breaking generational curses.
Yes, sir.
This is definitely a generational curse breaker.
Yeah. No, that's real. So, it's been great. Yeah, I ain't want to kill our energy, man. We had it going.
Yeah, this is good. This is good. This is a good episode.
So I don't know what's the last words. What do we want to wrap up with? Like how we want to wrap a bow on this thing,
man. Don't hide behind fear. Don't hide behind the fear of selling your brand, or even the idea of selling your brand, and allow the idea to inspire you based off of what we just laid out in this episode. Get from behind the fear and get out here and get exposed to the information. Because right now your fear is really really just ignorance, right? It's really just ignorance at the end of the day. It's just fear of the unknown. So at least just get out here, get from behind the fear, and get out here and get your exposure on, so that way you can be exposed to the people, exposed to the culture, and exposed to the knowledge, and exposed to some of these strategies that these companies are using to take themselves to the next level. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, I would hope that people take away from this and they put a different context around the idea of exit. Because exit is not a one size fit all. It's not like do it or don't, right?
Right.
There's exit in the sense of I can still own and control my company and let somebody else run it. I'm just exiting the operation. Then there's exit of I can sell a piece of my company.
Come on now.
You know what I'm saying? Then there's I can sell controlling interests of my company. Then I can sell my company outright. I can merge my company with another company, right? So it's like a bunch of versions of exit that really may make sense for you. So when you think about exit, I think a lot of times we're just thinking in this singular way,
right?
This thing you either do or don't, and don't really look at it through this lens of, well, there's multiple ways to kind of exit, if you will, because maybe you got other interests, you know what I'm saying? But you eat off your company, and maybe you still want to run it. I mean, maybe you don't still control the company in the direction of it, but I'm gonna exit the operations of it, put somebody else in, so I can go do the other stuff that I want, and then the money's still kicking off of it that I need to fund the ambitions that I have outside of my company. Like it's all of these things that I hope that these conversations gave people that context. That's me too. That's kind of how I want to wrap it.
Okay.
So I'll say that exiting isn't scary, right? But even if after this episode you're like scared shitless and you're like, oh my God, I'm never gonna exit, I'm never gonna get investors. Like, even if that's the case, right? And you don't want to go that route, focus on scalability. Yeah. Because at some point, for a couple of reasons. One, at some point you might very well think to yourself, hey, I should probably exit, because it turns out exiting is not so scary, right? You might learn the lesson that we're trying to impart on you here 5-10 years from now. And you want your company to be well primed to be able to, you want the option, you want to have that flexibility. Yeah. But also focusing on scalability allows you to be able to grow independently, right? It allows you to say, okay, well, maybe I'll take a little round of funding, and it'll allow you to stop there.
Yeah.
And then you won't have to take on more funding. You won't have to get to a place where a bunch of other people own, 60, 70, 80% of your company. Because you're able to create a system within your business that allows you to scale profitably on your own. Right. And at the end of the day, it's ultimately going to depend on kind of what your ultimate goals look like for what your organization is. Some people are more than happy sticking at around 10 million annually. Some people want to be the next Elon Musk, right? So that's going to play a role as well in terms of what your trajectory needs to be. But you cannot go wrong if you focus on, how do I make my brand more scalable? Yeah. You will never go wrong if you're able to focus on that and you're able to implement that effectively within your business.
So true.
Real talk.
All right. Well, this concludes this episode. And we look forward to y'all tuning in. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Please download and share with your friends, depending on what podcast platform you're listening to, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Peace.
Peace.
See ya.